Max Youngstein was one of the heads of United Artists.
There were a lot of experiments to try to chase off the competition of TV. You had the development of Cinerama, you had the development of CinemaScope. Give them what they couldn't see in their home because it was impossible to duplicate the size of the production.
20th Century Fox bought CinemaScope from the French. Darryl Zanuck peddled it to Americans.
We have a large screen that gives a semicircle around the theater, and you have the feeling that instead of looking at a small picture that you're observing, you have the feeling that you are in the picture, in the drama.
The first CinemaScope movie in production that spring was The Robe. It starred Richard Burton and Gene Simmons.
They wait to hear your defense.
It is not true that those of us who follow the teachings of Jesus are engaged in any plot against the state.
The CinemaScope process used a special lens that scrunched up the image. People looked like an El Greco painting. Then the image was unsqueezed for showing in a theater on an extra-wide screen. You needed special glasses for another Hollywood gimmick that spring, 3D. The second three-dimensional color movie starred Vincent Price.
They had to invent other things that would bring people in. One of them was 3D, which I happened to be a part of because I did a movie called The House of Wax, and it packed them in. And I used to go and sit in the back of the theater, preferably behind a couple of teenage girls. One day at the end of the picture, after they catch me, I leaned forward and I said to these girls, "Did you like it?" They just went, "Toom." I suppose my voice was identifiable by the end of the picture. It was extraordinary, the fear that the movie people had and the lengths they would go to bring people back into the theater.
A television critic wrote that spring that there's nothing wrong with Hollywood that a little TV can't cure. Hollywood had been selling some of its drab old B-movies to television, and now, for the first time, the Academy Awards were televised live.
This is indeed a wedding of two great entertainment mediums, with motion pictures and television. And with Oscar 25 years old, it's high time he got married.
It was a shotgun wedding, but it lasted. Hollywood began previewing new movies on Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town.
And now, we're going to give you a national preview of a 20th Century Fox picture, Titanic, starring Clifton Webb and Barbara Stanwyck.
Please, madam.
Hip, hip Hollywood. Hip, hip TV. Hooray for showbiz.
Television, a stepchild, common assumption, until a certain Sunday night in May, 1953, when a little live TV play climbed out, grabbed us by the heart, and wouldn't let go until we cried, "Marty."
Well, what do you feel like doing tonight?
I don't know. What do you feel like doing?
Well...
a love story about the kind of people you generally see at the movies, not in them. And it was good, Marty was. And when they did make a movie of it, it won the Best Picture of the Year, Marty did. Marty, a made-for-television movie.
Return to Dangerous Assumptions, spring 1953, when Our World continues.
How much is that dog in the window? The one with the waggly tail.
Our World will be right back.
That dog in the window. I do hope that doggy's for sale. I must take a trip.
Welcome back to Our World in the spring of 1953. We have seen some intrepid explorers make the dangerous assumption that they can scale Mount Everest safely. We'll follow them to the end of their journey a little later tonight. We have seen Hollywood make the false assumption that it can squelch television by putting bad movies into big, fancy packages. And that's not all we're assuming in the spring of '53.
Right. Take books. In spring, Senator Joe McCarthy, claiming the State Department's overseas libraries were riddled with commie literature, actually got the United States government into the book-burning business for a while. But you know, it's a funny thing about books. It's bad enough to want to burn them, but it's downright stupid to assume you can. You see, you can't burn a book. All you can burn is paper and ink and glue. Books will not be burned. The same cannot be said about people.
In the spring of '53, this country conducts 11 nuclear tests in 80 days in the air over Yucca Flats, Nevada, and marks the second anniversary of the conviction of 2 New Yorkers as atomic spies.
Someone had passed America's atomic bomb secrets to Russia. This was an undisputed fact that the whole world knew. The federal government had laid the crime at the doorstep of 2 native New Yorkers, Julius and Ethel.Rosenberg. In April of 1951, the federal court of Judge Irving R. Kaufman found the pair guilty as charged and sentenced them to death in the electric chair to pay for their crime of treason.
At the time of their parents' conviction in 1951, Robbie Rosenberg is almost 4. Michael is 8.
The image of my mother is softness. Dark, round face, very soft, very comfortable. My father was very excited person. We used to love to talk about sports.
The boys are allowed to see their parents on death row at Sing Sing prison. They make regular visits, accompanied by Emanuel Block, the Rosenbergs' lawyer. For them, as for most children that age, death is an abstraction.
Visits, to me, they were absolutely fantastic. No hearts and flowers, no upset. We played this game, which, you know, when you think about it, in a condemned cells in a prison was an odd game to play. It was called Hangman, where you...
I remember you playing that. That's
yeah,
I remember
you
looking
spell
over your
out,
shoulder. It was a mystery to me because I didn't have to spell.
Right, you had spelling things, and if you got a misspelling, you got another part of the body. And if you had enough misspellings, a whole body dangled from the noose, and you just lost the game. I had absolutely no thought that this was a macabre thing to be doing when my parents were facing execution.
The Supreme Court refuses to hear the Rosenbergs' repeated appeals. President Eisenhower refuses to grant clemency. Treason must be punished. James Kilsheimer was an assistant for the prosecution.
We in the government considered it the most important case in the country at the time and for many years before that time.
Gloria Agron was an assistant for the defense.
There was a steamroller going to finish this case because of the protests in Paris and Rome and Milan, all over the world.
Demonstrators in this country and a dozen countries in Europe protest the death sentence, some because they believe the Rosenbergs are innocent, others because it's the first time anyone will have been executed in peacetime for conspiracy to commit espionage. Robert Lamphere had worked on the case for the FBI.
We had thousands of American boys dying in Korea, and the idea that we would, at the height of the Korean War, give in to the protests that were being mounted by the Soviet propaganda machine was just unthinkable.
The White House gets thousands of letters and telegrams every week, pleading for the Rosenbergs' lives. Robbie and Michael Rosenberg deliver their letter in person. On June 15th, having refused to grant a stay of execution, the Supreme Court adjourns for the summer. In 3 days, the Rosenbergs are scheduled to die. At least that's the assumption.
June 16th, never assume. Justice William O. Douglas delays his vacation long enough to hear new arguments from new lawyers, Mike Farmer and Daniel Marshall. Maybe, just maybe. Meanwhile, at Sing Sing, Matty Block has brought the children to see their parents for what may or may not be the last time ever.